On the night of October 14, 1901, an entire passenger train vanished between Berlin and Dresden. 74 souls boarded, none arrived. The official records describe an incident of unknown cause. But in the archives of forgotten newspapers, in faded letters, and in brittle photographs, fragments of a darker truth remain. What happened to the fog train? The Berlin-Anhalter-Bahnhof station stood under the pale light of gas lamps. Witnesses recalled the night air being unusually heavy, a thin veil of mist crawling along the platforms. The 11:45 p.m. southbound train was scheduled to reach Dresden by dawn. It never did. Passengers included businessmen, 2 families with children, a group of university students, and several foreign travelers. Their names survive in ledgers, in luggage tags, and in the unsent letters later recovered. Among them was Dr. Emil Kraus, a physician from Leipzig, who carried with him a black leather case. In his journal, found years later, he wrote, "I hear the rails singing tonight, as though the metal itself hums in anticipation." Railway worker Karl Meissner testified in 1902 that the departure seemed normal, except for the fog. It was thicker than I had ever seen. It clung to the lamps, made halos in the light. By the time the whistle blew, the train was already swallowed by it. His account was dismissed as exaggeration. Yet station logs show an anomaly. The engineer never confirmed his arrival at the first checkpoint, Wunsdorf. Telegraph wires remain silent. By 1:30 a.m., Berlin operators realized the train was gone. By dawn, railway police scoured the tracks. From Berlin to Dresden, not a trace was found. The rails were intact, no sign of derailment, no wreckage. Witnesses in the villages along the route insisted no train passed in the night. Yet several claimed they were woken by a low metallic rumbling, like thunder beneath the earth. The Berliner Tagblatt reported on October 16, "An entire train, with passengers and crew, has disappeared. The ministry assures the public that all resources are being deployed. Still no evidence has surfaced. Families gather at the stations, waiting for news, their faces as pale as the fog that stole their loved ones." Strange reports emerged. In the town of Luckau, 2 women swore they saw figures on the tracks at dawn, clothed in travel coats, walking aimlessly. When approached, the figures faded like smoke. In another account, a farmer near Elsterwerda claimed he found a suitcase in his field, still warm to the touch, though the grass around it was frozen stiff. The suitcase, marked E.K., contained Dr. Kraus's medical instruments. The farmer surrendered it to authorities. Days later, it was gone from the evidence room.
Some said the train was robbed by anarchists and destroyed. Others whispered of military experiments with electromagnetism conducted in the forests outside Dresden. An Italian newspaper claimed the passengers had been taken by phantoms of the Prussian rails. Families demanded answers. Instead, officials sealed the files. By 1903, the fog train was officially declared a catastrophic disappearance with unknown casualties. 74 death certificates were issued. In 1906, a photograph surfaced in a Dresden antique shop. It showed a stretch of railway at night, but behind the trees, faint and blurred, stood what looked like a locomotive, its lamps glowing in the mist. The image bore the stamp of a Berlin photographer, dated 1901. Experts dismissed it as a double exposure, but the photograph vanished soon after, purchased by an unknown buyer. Among the missing were 4 university students from Heidelberg. In 1907, their families received letters, postmarked in Prague. The handwriting matched the students, yet the content was troubling. One letter read, "The fog does not lift. The train keeps moving. We cannot leave our seats. Outside the windows are landscapes we do not recognize. We beg you, do not search for us." The Prague authorities insisted the letters were forgeries. Still, the ink and paper dated correctly. Other letters were even stranger. A note that spoke of the sky bending in half. Another that described stations where the clocks had no hands. None of these letters carried stamps of the German or Austrian postal offices. Instead, they bore faint circular marks, unreadable and smudged, as if pressed in haste. By 1909, rumors spread in the Bohemian countryside. Shepherds spoke of abandoned wagons seen in the forests, covered in rust, yet impossibly intact. Children whispered of lights that moved silently along the old tracks at night. And in 1910, a traveling priest described hearing voices in the mist near Litoměřice, a woman crying, a conductor calling stations that no longer existed. The Czech parish archives preserved his written testimony. It read, "The fog rolled thick across the fields, yet within it I saw a glimmer, a great train moving without wheels, gliding above the ground. The windows were lit, and I swear upon the cross I saw faces pressed against the glass. They opened their mouths, but no sound came, only the wail of the wind. I fled, and behind me I heard the conductor call a name, a station that has never been built." 2 years later, in 1912, a pocket watch surfaced at an estate sale in Dresden. It belonged to Wilhelm Reuter, the train's conductor. His initials and railway insignia were engraved inside. The watch was stopped at exactly 12:04 a.m., 14 minutes minutes after departure. No one could explain how it reappeared after more than a decade. The buyer of the watch, a Dresden lawyer named Heinrich Vogt, kept it locked in a cabinet. In his diary, now kept in the Saxon State Archives, he wrote, "Each night at 12 past midnight, the watch ticks. Not for long, perhaps 30 seconds, but long enough to wake me from my sleep."
The First World War buried the story. Newspapers no longer spoke of the missing train, but in military archives, strange notes remain. German patrols near the Saxon border reported seeing phantom lights on the rails in 1916. Soldiers fired at them, but the lights only sank into the fog and vanished. One officer's report contains an even darker note. The men insist they heard singing, low and in unison. It followed them across the fields. I found one of the privates staring at the fog. He swore he saw his mother waving from a carriage window. His mother has been dead for 10 years. After the war, when Europe was trying to rebuild, the legend of the fog train returned in hushed conversations. Survivors of the front, especially those who fought near Dresden, told stories of spectral whistles that cut through artillery fire. And in village taverns, travelers claimed the line between Berlin and Dresden was haunted, that at night the fog hid more than trees. In 1924, a Czech railway worker named Janek reported seeing an entire train glide silently through the night, with windows lit but no sound of engine or wheels. He described faces staring out from the compartments. Some pressed their hands against the glass. He fainted before the train dissolved into mist. His testimony was recorded, but his mental state was deemed unstable. He was committed to an asylum near Prague, where he died the following year. His final words, "They are still traveling." By 1927, nearly 3 decades had passed since the night the train vanished. For most, the story had become a ghost tale, told in whispers at railway taverns, a cautionary legend for children. But in February of that year, something surfaced that forced the authorities to quietly reopen their files. 3 abandoned passenger wagons were found in a forest clearing near the German-Czech border. They were overgrown with ivy, rusted, but bore the markings of the 1901 Dresden line. The local hunters who stumbled upon them swore the wagons had not been there the week before. Inside, no bodies were found, only luggage, coats neatly folded, children's toys left on the seats. More disturbing were the photographs discovered in one of the compartments. Faded, water-damaged, yet clear enough to see. The passengers, their faces pale, eyes wide, as if frozen mid-scream. The strangest detail, the angles of the photographs suggested they had been taken from within the wagons themselves, as though someone had stood among the passengers. But no photographer was ever identified, and none of the cameras recovered from the site contained film. A German investigator, Captain Otto Lenz, was assigned to the case. His notes, smuggled out of police archives years later, describe an overwhelming sense of dread. The air inside the wagons was stale, though the windows were broken. The seats bore indentations, as if passengers had only just risen. I found children's handprints on the glass, but the size of them seemed distorted. Too long, the fingers stretched unnaturally. When I looked at the photographs, I had the uncanny feeling the eyes were watching me directly. I requested the case be closed. For the sake of my sanity, I never want to see those wagons again. Within weeks, the wagons were dismantled and transported to an unknown location. No official record remains of their current whereabouts. Families of the missing demanded access, but were met with silence. Rumors spread quickly. Some claimed the wagons were burned, others that they were taken to a military installation near Dresden. A handful of conspiracy-minded journalists insisted they had been placed in underground vaults, along with other forbidden artifacts. Whatever the truth, the disappearance of the wagons became a second mystery, layered upon the first. Meanwhile, reports of the phantom train continued. In rural Saxony, villagers spoke of a whistle in the fog, heard long after midnight when no scheduled trains ran. Travelers on horseback told of crossing paths with a train that glided across meadows, not bound by rails, its lamps casting shadows that moved against the wind. The Berlin press, cautious after years of war and political upheaval, refused to publish such stories. Yet private diaries tell a different tale. In 1928, a school teacher from Meissen wrote, "On my way home, the fog grew so thick I could hardly see my horse's reins. Suddenly, a beam of light shone from the mist, and before me I saw the outline of a train. I could hear no wheels, no steam, but the windows were full of faces. They looked at me as if pleading. I turned away, and when I looked back, the fields were empty." By 1929, the case had once again been buried under bureaucracy. Files were locked, statements dismissed, but the legend had grown. People along the Berlin-Dresden line no longer spoke of the missing train with curiosity. They spoke of it with fear. In taverns, railway workers refused to walk the tracks alone at night. Families warned children never to follow the sound of a whistle in the fog. And old conductors, men who had spent their lives on the rails, claimed they knew the truth. "The train did not vanish," one was heard to say. "It found another track, not one built by men, but something older, something that still runs beneath us." The decade drew to a close, and with it came more whispers of the vanished train. Though the authorities denied everything, private collectors and archivists began to quietly circulate fragments: a blurred photograph, a page torn from a diary, a luggage tag with mold growing across the ink.
each relic seemed to breathe unease, as if the very objects carried the fog with them. In 1930, the Berliner Lokalanzeiger published a brief and unsettling notice. Several residents reported hearing the whistle of a train last night, though no scheduled departures occurred. Some insist it was the missing southbound of 1901. Others refuse to speak of it.
The clipping was small, almost hidden among advertisements and weather reports. Yet it was the last time the fog train appeared in print. Official silence swallowed it once again. Still, stories persisted in the countryside. Farmers claimed that when the fog lay heavy on the fields, their livestock grew restless, eyes rolling white, ears pricked toward the tracks. Shepherds whispered of shadows crossing the hills, long shapes sliding past with the sound of distant wheels. In 1931, a young boy in Riesa disappeared after telling his mother he heard the music of the rails. His shoes were found near the line, damp with dew, but untouched by mud, as if he had stepped into the mist and never touched the earth again. Railway workers, too, felt the weight of the legend. One veteran signalman recalled seeing lamps glowing in the distance, swaying as though on a moving engine. He sent a warning telegram to Dresden, fearing a collision. But when he checked the line, the lamps had vanished. The rails were cold to the touch, untouched by any recent weight. Perhaps the most unsettling evidence came from a Dresden archivist named Martin Vogel. In 1932, while cataloging old railway documents, he discovered a manifest he swore he had never seen before. It was dated October 14th, 1901, the night of the disappearance. But the details were wrong. The names of passengers were slightly altered. Kraus became Kraus. Wilhelm Reuter was written as W. Reuter. The strangest alteration was the destination. Instead of Dresden, the manifest listed a station that did not exist, Rauchtor, the Gate of Smoke. When Vogel attempted to present his finding to his superiors, the document was gone from his desk. He resigned soon after, claiming that the fog had followed him into his own home, seeping beneath the doors at night. Those who dared investigate further came to similar ends. A Czech historian who tracked reports of the fog train across villages disappeared in 1933. His last surviving note, scribbled on hotel stationery, read, "They do not want to return. They want us to join them." By then, Europe stood once more at the edge of conflict. The ghost of the train seemed a trivial matter compared to the rise of political storms. Yet the silence of 74 passengers remained. In attics and in libraries, their names lingered in faded ink.
Their belongings, a broken violin, a woman's parasol, a child's wooden horse, surfaced in flea markets, never claimed, never explained. The story has no resolution. No wreckage was ever found, no body ever recovered. Only the fog and the occasional whistle in the dark. Even today, railway workers along the Berlin-Dresden line speak of it in hushed tones. They say the fog carries the sound of wheels, the hiss of steam, and the echo of voices calling stations that no longer exist. They say if you stand too close to the tracks when the fog is heavy, you will see lamps approaching, and if you do not step back, you may never return.
The file ends here. No explanation. Only the silence of 74 passengers traveling still in a train of fog. Time has not diminished the unease. More than a century later, the legend of the fog train still clings to the tracks between Berlin and Dresden like rust that cannot be scrubbed away. Researchers, folklorists, and the occasional thrill seeker continue to dig through archives, hoping to find something the official reports missed. What they find, instead, are fragments, hints that refuse to align into a clear picture. In 1964, long after the Second World War had torn Germany apart and pieced it back together, construction workers repairing a section of the railway unearthed a corroded railway lantern. The style matched those used in 1901, but the glass inside was unbroken, and when it was lifted, witnesses swore they saw condensation forming as though the lantern had only just been extinguished. The lantern was sent to Berlin for analysis. No record of its arrival exists. Decades later, in 1987, a retired East German officer published a memoir. Buried in the final chapters was a startling confession. During a patrol in 1952, his men encountered what they thought was a trespassing train. They prepared to stop it, but as it emerged from the fog, it passed directly through the checkpoint barriers without disturbing them. "I saw the passengers," he wrote. "They looked dead, yet their mouths moved. Some beat against the glass. We fired at the wheels, but our bullets went into the mist." His account was ridiculed, and the book was quietly withdrawn from circulation. The story refuses to die. Every decade brings a new report, a new claim. In 1999, a tourist claimed to have captured the outline of a ghostly locomotive on video near Elsterwerda. The tape was studied and dismissed as a trick of light. In 2008, a Dresden librarian uncovered a bundle of letters from the early 20th century, many unsigned, all describing dreams of a train moving endlessly through fog. Some described voices calling out their names from the windows. But the most chilling report of recent years came in 2013, when a freight operator near Luckau heard a whistle echo across the fields. His instruments showed no train in the area, yet when he looked down the track, he saw lights approaching.
He radioed Dresden control, shouting about a possible collision. Moments later, the lights faded and the fog lifted. His shift report was marked as hallucination. He never worked the rails again. And still the story endures. Perhaps it is just a legend, stretched thin across generations. Perhaps the fog train is no more than a trick of memory, a fear passed from one witness to another until it became folklore. But when the mist rises along the tracks, and the night is silent except for the faint hum of steel, some believe the train still passes. They say its whistle can be heard if you stand very still, the sound trembling just beyond human hearing. They say you will feel the vibration beneath your feet, as though the earth remembers the weight of the missing carriages. And if you are unlucky enough, they say you will see faces in the fog, pale, open-mouthed, begging to be released. The official records close the file in 1903. Catastrophic disappearance with unknown casualties. 74 death certificates issued. But the fog carries no respect for paper or ink. The fog remembers. The fog keeps. And every so often, on a damp October night, the rails sing again.